Really leading to actionable guidelines to enhance anti-corruption efforts across various sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, and this session will be discussion on the topic of open data and to be followed by Q&A session. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to each of panelists and moderator to share their insights. And please join me in welcoming Mr. Bagja Hidayat, Vice Editor-in-Chief, Tempo Magazine, Indonesia, Ms. Thanisara Ruangdej, the CEO and co-founder, Vivis, Mr. Khairil Yusof, Program Consultant, Sinar Project, Ms. Bernadine Fernz, Head of Sustainability and Infrastructure, the Open Contacting Partnership, along with our moderator, Ms. Cynthia Gabriel, Senior Anti-Corruption Advisor and Consultant for ASEAN Region Center for International Private Enterprise, to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I know we are scheduled to have a coffee break, but we are so motivated we will stay on for the first panel. And I'm very honored to actually take on the role of moderator for this morning. I wanted to take off from what Anika has said, what Professor Matthew has said, and most of all what Dr. Masood had also mentioned about anti-corruption efforts and why we are here today and why we need to make this conference different. We don't just want to end up with a lot of good feedback and thoughts and not sure what we're going to do about it next. So my name is Cynthia Gabriel. I am a Malaysian anti-corruption activist for many years, and I am actually very honored to be here because I remember last year at about the same time, we had the first anti-corruption conference on innovations, and it was also hosted here in Thailand. So it is now time to come back and time to look at where is it that we are after 1 year and some of the issues that we want to take on. So I would say, based on some of the feedback that Anika has given, we now have a civil society network in ASEAN, and some of these personalities, which are very honorable speakers, are actually leading the charge. We have a journalist network also set up in Southeast Asia. Now we want to look at what is it that we can do to move forward on some of these issues that we're talking about. So panel 1 is on open data, and panel 1 is all about data. And this is all about also using technology to find ways to actually combat corruption, using data to actually look at how we can get ahead of the criminals, how we can get ahead of the corrupt offenders, and not just keep chasing after them, because it seems like a lot of what we are talking is about why data is so important. We know why data is so important, but we also want all of these four speakers to tell us how we can use data to actually move forward. Now, open data is already in the mainstream. We have many ASEAN countries that have started initiatives around open data. But we're also talking about the right to information. It is a fundamental right. And the information, a lot of the time, doesn't belong to the government. But how is it that we can use data out there to actually publish and do something for a purpose? And so with that in mind, I actually am very, very honored to have speakers from Malaysia, Mr. Khairil Yusof, Program Consultant, Sinar Project, Ms. Thanisara from Thailand, founder of Punch-Up, Mr. Bagja Hidayat from Tempo, Vice Editor-in-Chief of Tempo, one of the leading journalists, investigative journalists that is actually present in Indonesia, and from Open Contracting Partnership, Ms. Bernadine Fernz. So I also wanted to let you know there are 3 Malaysians actually sitting in front of you. And we'll try not to dominate too much on what's going on in Malaysia, because Bernadine is also Malaysian, but she resides in the UK, and she's been with COST and with the Open Contracting Partnership for many years. So welcome, everyone. I am just going to make sure that there's enough room for participation from all of us, distinguished guests from the floor, and also for us to have more of a dialogue in order to be able to move this conversation forward. So, may I now start with Ms. Thanisara first to actually give us 7 minutes opening presentations, what is it you want to say, and if you have slides, you may share them.
Hi, thank you, Cynthia, and good morning, everyone. May I have a slide, please? Yes, before the slide came, I can briefly introduce myself. You can call me Gigi, it's easier. Actually, I'm based in Bangkok, Thailand, and I work in a private sector, but I start a project that we call VWIS, which is civic technology, which is not kind of the familiar things in Thailand. Not many of us here, but I'm happy that Khairil is here because he works in the same field of us. Do we have a clicker or? Okay, can I go to the next slide? Or should we have a clicker? Thank you. Can I have 1 more minute for preparation? Thank you. Yes. Okay, we start our group. I said it's not a kind of official organization, but we started our group on 2018 before the last general election. We are a group of people who believes that we have the fundamental rights, which is the right to information. So when Anika talk about that, it's kind of touching for me because I think for over 7 years I work on these topics. We still face the struggle with that on this country. It's better, but not better enough. And so we are a group of young people who kind of have skills in technology, in data, in design, or maybe we have just a common skill but interest in kind of empower people to participate more in the social issue. And we believe if we have enough information, we can make better decisions, we can contribute more constructive feedback, and we can initiate more solution to kind of participate in the social issue. So right now we are focused on 3 main topics with one additional practice. So the topics we try to use open data and technology to empower people is about the election, about the parliament monitoring. Actually, we try to expand our work to other public organizations as well, including the organization like NACC. And the other one is about the open budget. Just like Anika said, we need to know, because we are taxpayers, so we need to know how our money is going to spend and how is there kind of transparency that happen in this process. And the additional practice is about we support the NGO and other CSO who may lack of digital skills to kind of develop the data-driven campaign strategy or the digital tools to encourage more movement about anti-corruption and also reclaim our human rights in the society. So that's Vivi's work for the following for the past 5 years. And we rely on this framework. I think we didn't develop this framework. It's a kind of common framework for the civic tech who work on the open data. Whichever projects we work on, we focus on 3 main things. First, we want to make data or information more accessible, because we believe that with this accessible data, we can create transparency and accountability from the public officials. And the second level, we want to, based on that information, we want to kind of create the participation that happen, rely on that data. And the last thing, I think it is said a lot during this morning, we cannot work alone. We need to bridge the gap among the civil society and also between the public, private, and civil society organization as well. So we try to align on this framework and work on the issue that we need to tackle with. So today, because of the short time, I will present you this framework, how we use this framework to work on these 3 projects, which is kind of our highlight project that we put a lot of effort on. The first one is we developed a project that called Parliament Watch, because we, as just like I told you, we want to monitoring what happened in the legislative process in this country after the election, and also the legislation has an effect, a lot of effect on our society, on a lot of policy, a lot of budget. Just like Anika said, we need to kind of advocate for some legal framework to make sure that no one can violate the rules, that the common rule that we set together. So right now we are developing the platform that we call Parliament Watch, which is not existing in our country yet, but we learn a lot from Indonesia and Malaysia that we can use this to not only to monitor the government, but to create the participatory process from the people as well, because we just not go for the election and let it go for 4 years. That doesn't make any sense. The second project is we are developing the project that we call Open Budget. Right now, to track or monitor the national spending is quite challenges for the press, for the policy think tank, or even for the people like us. So right now we try to work with the budget office, National Budget Office, to digitize all the data and make them more understandable to the normal people. I know it's a big challenge for almost for every country, but right now in Thailand, people rarely participate on this. So we want to know how our money will be spending each year with this project. And the last project I want to talk about is we call Politics Data. In collaboration with Anti-Corruption Thailand and also Hand Social Enterprise, we want to know, because we get the idea that corruption may sometimes happens because of the networking and non-disclosure of information about their assets and liabilities. So we developed this project. And to follow Matthew, who set the standards for this conference, I try to analyze the challenge in three steps of frameworks, what happened in each project, and the way a kind of activity we can do to overcome it. So I think in Thailand, I can share with you that we have 3 main challenges about the information level. I think it's maybe in other countries as well. First, we still have non-disclosed information because of our Information Act is not good enough. It's still called Official Information Act, which is different from what Anika said. We need to declare our reason to ask the government, the state, to open the data, which is not reverse. It should be reversed. The state should declare the reason why they don't open the data. So right now, we not only develop the project, we also advocate to fix, to amend the Information Act right now. And we still have for the second and third issue, it deals with a technical solution. Even the information is open, it's still kind of analog. It's paper-based, document-based PDF, or it's on the paper, and also disorganized. It's scattered around multiple resources. So actually, I learned this concept from Khairil last year, and we focus on research and development on the data techniques through some tools like OCR, ETL, and LP, and we create a team for the audits to make sure that the data we gather, we transform and we open to the people, kind of verify, correct, and have a single source of truth. With this process, with this thing we also make it open source. That means anyone who interested in this technology, in this practice, can adopt it and use it in other issues as well. And the second level for the participation for the activities, with that open data, we try to kind of promote it. We are different kind of activity to, just like Cynthia said, to kind of encourage the impact of open data, make other people know. So we create a kind of digital tools for the voter to the public. We work with the press, with the journalists, and with the policy think tank to give them a kind of database so they can make and offer the solution to the society. And the last thing, we also with the kind of political persons, the political officers, to kind of let them know how can they contribute in the aspect of the public sector, because we believe only CSO, only non-state organization cannot fix them all. Sometimes it needs to rely on policy as well. And the last level of collaboration, we also have both domestically and internationally collaboration. First, we try to work with a kind of parliament or even the government to kind of fix the issue that deal with open data and participation. But I would like to say, because this is an international stage, so we have now worked with kind of a lot of international community. For example, we have a community that called Parliament Monitoring Networks around the world. So we share the knowledge, we develop our own index, and we get back to our government, our parliament, to promote them, to promote the way we work better. And the last thing we just developed with Khairil, according from the last conference, we concerned about international open data standard, and then we try to make our work comply with that. So in summary, as like Matthew said, I think we can, from today and all participants, I think we can join not only knowledge sharing, but because corruption is a cross-border issue, we may create something, the platform, the process that we can adopt information sharing. And then we can create a joint project and a joint campaign together. So if you are interested in this, so you can contact Vivis. We are into it. Thank you.
Thank you. I extended it by 1 minute because she needed to mention cross-border challenges around open data. So that's where we are trying to go. I think you're doing a great job in Thailand, but I have just one question about how much of the public in Thailand know where to go and look for open data?
You mean only in Thailand or?
Public, citizens.
Mostly, I think just like maybe not like other country, but not the open data is not that popular in this country. But when the critical things happen, just like Anika said, the COVID things happen, the crisis of economy happen, they start from the state first. They ask from the state first. But right now, if we have a civil society like us, for example, from the last election, they go into our website more than the election commission because we have our CSO that work on each issue. So I think the trend has changed and they kind of look for the non-state organization.
Okay, thank you. Now with that kind of backdrop and a lot of the work that's being done in Thailand, we now want to move to another democracy, another example for many years, but another very populous country that has given us so much to learn over how the democracy has evolved or not evolved. So now I'd like to introduce Pak Bagja again from Tempo, and he is the Vice Editor-in-Chief and has done a lot of work on investigative journalism, also with a link to climate and environment. So it's very interesting to actually focus also on cross-border and some of the challenges faced by Indonesia. Again, you have 7 minutes, and if you speak more regional issues, I'll give you another minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, and good morning, everyone. My name is Bagja Hidayat from Tempo, Indonesia. We're based in Jakarta, but on our law, should be all office move to our new capital in Kalimantan. The government want to this years, but we don't know that's make a turbulent on politics. So I want to share what is happening in Indonesia today due to business integrity, journalism, free speech, and democracy, because this is the important thing on what's happening in Indonesia today. And I will share what we do as a journalist and media, focusing on impact to the business and investment. We make some investigative journalism, focus on to the business and investment, and then focus on to natural resources, sorry, and more focus on the nickel, because now nickel is a very popular as natural resources in Indonesia. But before that, oh, sorry. Okay, but before that, I want to bring you to the see back what happened in Indonesia, 1998. This is when student and activists occupy our parliament building, asked President Suharto resign due to financial crisis and authoritarian powers. This is our turning point after 1945, 1965, and 1998. This is the turning point for history of Indonesia, because that's 1998. The activists and the students bring back the democracy in Indonesia. So the Indonesia we start the democracy era. That is important thing. That's because we enter the era of press freedom after the before 1998. Government make a censorship and drive the media and free speech in Indonesia. Our magazine banned by the government twice in 1994 and 1984. But the 1994 is deadly, and then we publish underground and share the article analysis to the student and activists by the underground, and then this is pushed to the we phase of the Reformation era on 1998, and then the press freedom. This is the result that we can make an investigative story on the anything issues. This is the example that's we focus on the impact to the business, democracy, and investment. That's make Indonesian after Reformation, after 1998, that's pursue the growing economic in Asia. That's free speech make the open data. That's Indonesia now is by regulation have open data commission body, so they can ask to the government and the corporation to open the data to the journalists, to the NGO activists, and so on. So this is the example what we cover on the nickel, and because the nickel is driven by government regulation to push the economic growing right now. But when we cover the nickel in Sulawesi and Maluku, because the central of nickel in Indonesia is only two regions, Maluku and Sulawesi, and there's more small island in there, and we see that's the after the government push the investment of the nickel mining in there, there is the push at the same time the push of illegal mining as well. So this is challenges to us because the nickel mining in Sulawesi and Maluku is pushed to the big deforestation. Big deforestation is challenging for us because we promises to the UNFCCC that we want to prevent the involving the climate crisis mitigation to decrease the carbon emission. And the Indonesian driven climate mitigation is deforestation. So this is the ironic thing that we want to deliver the green energy by the nickel to the electric vehicle, but at the same time we push the deforestation as the source of the climate crisis mitigation. And now there is we have our country is the largest nickel reserves. That's 42% by globally, and only in Sulawesi and Maluku, 800,000 hectares, and operate only by 55 companies, and nickel area mostly in forest area. So if you come to Indonesia and want to do business nickel in our countries, you at least you should have two permits. One is a permit on mining, coming from Ministry of Mining, and the second one the permit from Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So if you do not have the one permit of two, that is the illegal operation. That's mostly of 55 companies is mostly illegal, refers to they don't have the permit open forest from the Ministry of Environment. That is, we call it the illegal operation, and because the government invite so many investors to come to Sulawesi and Indonesia and Maluku to open the smelters, that is the demand of nickel is rising on the last three or 4 years. And the other driver is the government ban direct export the nickel ore to the abroad. So the investors, so many investors coming from China, coming to Maluku and Sulawesi to open the smelters. There is push the illegal mining operation because the corruption term in Indonesia. And this is maybe 1 or 2 weeks after we publish the illegal operation in Sulawesi and Maluku, the police coming to the ground and make law enforcement and arrested minor and some business owners. And the 55 companies in the ground, that is a big business, of course, and all players is mostly make a tie with the political player and military and police and so on. So that is the chronic problem on the natural resources mining in Indonesia. And so like Cynthia mentioned before, that the open data is important, but in Indonesia context, I want to add more that the business integrity is more important, and the democratic system is more important. That let's see the what happened in Indonesia. After we published the illegal nickel, that's the prosecutor arrested some of owners business. On the left photo is the name is Windu Aji. Windu Aji is head of the voluntary group, political voluntary group that support of our president, Mr. Jokowi, on the election. And in the Jokowi era is so many voluntary group for support their political movement. We know that Mr. Jokowi is a member of the largest party, but he is conflicting with the political members in the party. So he needs voluntary groups, a big voluntary group that's huge members like Mr. Windu Aji. And after Mr. Jokowi became president, Mr. Windu Aji has running the big business on the nickel. And the right one is the Director General, the second person in the mining ministry that has a powerful hand to drive mining business in Indonesia. And then now is nickel on politics is the government revoked more than 2,000 permits in Indonesia and want to share to the social organization that support the political player on the election. That is, we call it design and drive corruption by legalize. Why? Because there is the political payback after the organization, big organization, religious, religious, social, and mass organization support the political, and then after that, the political gave back by the natural resources permit mining. This is what happened right now in Indonesia.
Bagja, can you end this?
Okay, so one more slide, and now it's illegal operation still ongoing. I took photo last year, and then because the media do investigative story by legal government and our parliament want to ban investigative story by the broadcasting law revision. And after the media bans, the government and parliament want to occupy the constitutional court to the replace judge that who rejected government regulation. So we call it this term is autocratic legalism. That's threat to our democracy in today. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you. I think that was an awesome display of the power of investigative journalism. Do you need a bodyguard?
Yeah.
No, okay. No, I'm just joking. But what I wanted to say is this is a good example of sustainable development being threatened of environmental crimes and of cross-border crimes, which actually involves moving the nickel exports from Indonesia to Philippines and to several other countries, and how we often don't really get an opportunity to talk so much about China's influence on a lot of these important raw material. So in Malaysia, we are actually facing a lot of challenges similarly on critical minerals because it's a move towards green technology. And the industry is so lucrative, but the technology has to come from outside. And then it gets exported. And everything you said about from democracy to actually stifling freedom of expression and how corruption is linked to human rights becomes so clear. But I want us to focus back on the issue of how we can use data, like you did, like both of you did, to actually help advance our work. And so this is a great example, but it is also putting journalists at great risk. And it's very important to actually develop capacity for civil society and journalists to become more investigative. You know, we all have our mobile phones. We all have camera, but instead of taking Facebook pictures of ourselves and our food that we eat, you know, it's really good to be vigilant of some things that are happening around us. Don't simply post things up, but you might want to give it to people who know how to discern whether this is actually a good thing to follow up, what to do when you see a malpractice, etc. So the whole call for whistleblower protection is all the more important. Now I'm going to move to Khairil from Sinar Project, who will just lift us a little bit more on another conversation around standards, how to report, what to look for, and how ASEAN also needs to adopt a more uniform framework around open data, information that we need to get, and how to actually follow the money, or how to follow procurement process, how to follow a lot of different things. So I'm sorry to put a time limit again, but please try to make it within 7 or 8 minutes.
Waiting for my slides. Okay, 7 minutes. Okay, so it's a good. Hi, I'm Khairil from Sinar Project. We're like a sister organization to WeVis in Malaysia. I'm so happy that Cracked introduced us because now we have two similar organizations working on these issues in Southeast Asia. We already saw Gigi show what could be done in terms of the applications and innovations on the application side to make it more accessible or data more accessible. And we've just heard from Tempo about how the investigations and what the end result of the investigations are. But there's a lot of work behind both of these efforts. That story probably took you 6 months. So it's a long process. I'm going to try to introduce what are those processes behind getting that story out and those applications in, and how does regulations, guidelines, media, and data work together to support each other's work. So in the previous regional meeting at Chulalongkorn, I shared how with open data standards, you can collaborate and build different applications, and Gigi just shared those examples of what's possible in Thailand. So if you have open data standards, you can then collaborate, share data between different civil society organizations, media, and government to build these sort of parliament transparency applications. Later on, what we learned, as what Gigi also shared, is that once you start collecting these sort of data, you start getting the pieces of information to build anti-corruption and transparency applications. So this is with open contracting. Bernadine will share it in a bit shortly. So for Sinar Project, one of our earlier successes was to show that if you have data on politically exposed persons, if you have data on procurement, and you have data on beneficial ownership, you will be able to have the pieces needed to show conflict of interest in procurement. So in order to show corruption, you have to show, one, that there was a procurement, two, that somebody, the beneficial owner of that, is also a politically active person who benefited from that corruption. Unfortunately, in reality, this is a lot harder. So the collaboration that I propose in terms of working at all three different levels is that there's a harmonization needed between the guidance done by policy and regulations such as UNODC, FAATF, and others, with media guidelines and with data standards. We're actually all working on the same thing at different levels, and each reinforces each other. So there's multiple challenges when dealing with these sort of things. And then if there are mistakes by journalists and civil society, there are repercussions, as Cynthia shared, when you misreport it. So here an example is that if you make a mistake or you report on these things, you can be blocked, censored, and other ways of repression. So I'll start with introduction, because not everybody is from the same background. So at the highest level, we have international regulatory and enforcement policy agencies. So we have organizations like the Financial Action Task Force. We have UNCAC, which Annika shared earlier. We have organizations such as the EU Anti-Money Laundering, I can't remember, agency, and so all these kind of agencies do high-level guidelines. So I'm not going to read the whole text in there, but as an example, for Financial Action Task Force, they have this standard on what a politically exposed person is, and they have these broad definitions, which are then applied into regulatory or other sort of frameworks by banks and enforcement agencies in terms of trying to implement this. So for example, if you try to open a bank account in most countries these days, they will ask if you're a politically exposed person, and if you're on that list, you will then come to greater scrutiny and limitations. The other part for those of you who are not from the media side is that before you publish a story, on the media side, we also have what we call editorial guidelines and guidance. So these are things that are terms and standards of what a media organization reports. So for example, I'm just giving, it's an extensive example, but BBC has it all published online. So when you say things like, this person is a close associate in a news report, an editorial guideline will require the journalists, it will have to be clearly defined in terms of what that means, in terms of the standards for that media organization, and what sources I have to provide as a journalist before the story is published. And finally, on the data side, how these are standards or data structures. It looks a little bit more technical, so I'm not sure how many people are technical background. But generally, all those information that I just shared just now, the FATF guidelines on PEPs, the media guidelines or editorial guidelines, when you turn it into an application, these needs to be in a structured data format. And this is where the work of open contracting, beneficial ownership, and others work to define these standards based on those policy regulations and guidelines. So we need to publish it in quality format across standards in order to build the applications that Gigi just showed. So there's a need for collaboration and harmonization because all these things at each level reinforce each other. Why do we need to harmonize on this? I think I've got a minute left. Because the anti-corruption and policy guidance provides these kind of international standards for the definitions. For media organizations, they need to investigate and verify against these standards. And then for civil society and civic tech, when we need to collect and organize this data, we need to also match that the data that we're collecting matches these definitions as reported by media and by guidelines, right? And this collaboration leads to direct correlation. FATF guideline results to implementation by policy report it in media, and then you get the impact like you showed in Tempo. Who are these politicians and so on? So the more that we collaborate with each other, each standards at each level reinforces each other, and it leads to a direct impact on the ground all the way down to the story level. And this is just a quick recap. I think I've got a minute now, or maybe just give me a minute, Cynthia. So this is how, for those of you not familiar, about what goes into Tempo's reporting. So to say a simple statement like there was illegal politicians involved in illegal mining, on the back end, there's 3 months of hard work to verify every word on that report. So I'm just going to give an example. Say, for example, if the media headline or lead says a lack of oversight by enforcement, then you're going to have to define exactly what that enforcement or lack of oversight is. And this is where you would then refer to guidance. So when you say this is a politically exposed person, what do you mean by that? What sources do I need to look as a journalist before I can make such a statement, and only then can it be published? And these are all the pieces of information. So when we're doing anti-corruption, anything that's related to anti-corruption, the journalists are going to need to find all these sources. So I'm just going to go fast here. This is an example of politically exposed persons at 3 different levels as a practical example. So at FATF level, you'd have high policy guidance. You have national policy regulations, for example, in Bank Negara Malaysia or the Central Bank of Malaysia. You have editorial guidance from organizations like Malaysia Kini on how to report these things. And then, of course, you have the data standard. So how does it look like? The text is small, but on the left side, you have the definitions by the central bank or FATF on what politically exposed persons are. But some of them are not accurate enough or detailed enough for media reporting. So for example, in FATF, one of the definitions is a close associate. What is a close associate? If I just say this is a close associate and submit my story, and my editor's going to ask me, what do you mean? And what sources do you say that these are a close associate? So on the editorial side, this is from Malaysia Kini. I will then have, as an editorial guideline, how do I report a close associate? So they break it down. Business partner, what sources, information do I need to say before this person is a business partner? Even a romantic partner, I need to provide proof. And then what's the definition between a romantic partner and even things like subordinate? Like these are the things and definitions that we get from the policy guidelines. And then finally, folks like me and Gigi, we need to store this into a data structure so that it matches, so that we can do innovations on it. And here's, I'm going to skip the beneficial ownership because I'm running out of time. Yep. So this is an example of an early work that we did in 2015 where we only had one standard. We didn't actually follow politically exposed persons and so on, and we only had basic directors and organizations and relationships between organizations. As a result, if you notice in this one, it looked really good. Okay. Sorry, one of the screens just went off. It looks really good, but the central person in this one
it
NDB
actually means cut-off time.
Yeah, is missing. But if you do a little bit more, in terms of once you have beneficial ownership and so on, you start having more connections, and now you have all the links into Jolo, and now he's included in it. I'm just going to circle back as a finishing comment for this, is the fact that, so in this case, for example, I'm showing Eung Soo Ling. She is a subordinate of Jolo, the mastermind around 1MDB. And after she lost her job, she ended up being hired by Nazir Razak for a high senior management position at a bank. And this is the kind of relationships that we're now able to bid data based on the reporting by Malay Mail. I'm going to skip the beneficial ownership because I'm out of time. But I'm just going to wrap it up with the challenges and opportunities. I just mentioned Eung Soo Ling just now. Technically, that is not corruption. I think all of you would know that that seems a little bit suspicious, right? A person who's in a key figure loses their job and then is hired in a senior position to do basically menial tasks like writing speeches. hired by the brother of the Prime Minister of Malaysia, who's now in jail for corruption. We all know that's wrong, but that's not corruption. What is this? So more additional definitions of this need to be developed so that we can report on it accurately and in a standard manner. We also need to have more standards into the connections between the people that we're connecting to corruption issues or an expanded version of corruption issues. So just now in that screen, I showed all the people connected to Jolo. None of them are arrested. Most of them are still holding high positions in various organizations in Malaysia. How do we link to them? That's a standard in media, but also in data. And we also need more inputs from civil society in the development of these standards so that we can use them. So sometimes in data, certain things are missing, and sometimes in media, we need clearer definitions before we can report on them. And finally, the last part is a challenge why we need to do this is that we also need to do more harmonization between law enforcement and media reporting. Media often reports the facts, but often we don't hint towards what is missing for enforcement. So when there are issues in Malaysia where enforcement is not done, we have a lot of cases where cases are dismissed without acquittal. If media can be a little bit harmonized in terms of getting the evidence and reporting directly correlated to a possible enforcement agency, then this would be a lot more helpful in terms of reporting when there are cases where corruption is not actually enforced, as Annika shared. So yeah, I'll wrap it up with that. Thanks.
A clap. Yeah, I think we are getting more and more into data, how to use it to investigate corruption. And one new thing that you're also talking to us about is this hot topic about enabling corruption. Who are the enablers? Who are those that are helping, assisting, quote unquote, to allow money to flow in such a way? Illicit finance in Southeast Asia is a very big deal because we score very high on illicit finance rather than on accountable finance. So we need to actually find ways to curb money laundering. We need to use FATF standards. And in some ways, I think the standard setting should be left to these big international organizations, but like the UNODC, FATF, and all that. But the question is, how does it get translated into domestic, national situations? And for open contracting, which we're going to hear shortly on all the great work they do on procurement, the challenge is to help us develop national procurement laws, different forms of policy reform that's needed. But you have highlighted a lot of issues around enabling corruption. Who are these characters that actually help? And it would work if open data can actually look at mapping relationship profiles. It's not just about the issue per se, but who's benefiting from the whole thing. And whether banks are involved, international law firms are involved. We hear so many cases, right? But I think it's time to actually get ahead of all these different actors. So now, to cap off the panel, we're really lucky to get Open Contracting Partnership with us here to talk about procurement. And this is a big deal. And this is one of the shortlisted issues that civil society has found to be critical to combat corruption. So we need all the guidance we can get. So Bernadine, the floor is yours. And please try to keep to the time.
I will be mindful. Thank you, Cynthia, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Huge thanks to the organizers for inviting me. Can you all hear me okay? Good? Can you hear me in the back? Raise your hands. Great, thanks so much. All right, before I start, I'm just gonna ask you to give me a show of hands if you thought about using open data as a tool for fighting corruption. If you have, put your hands up. Some hands in the front, some in the back. How many of you have thought about public procurement as a vital piece of the fight against corruption? Some of you? How many of you have heard of open contracting? Oh, more than I thought. Great. All right. Well, hopefully after today, all of you will know a little bit more about public procurement, a little bit more about open contracting, and a little bit more about how open data can help to transform public procurement so that we can start to fight corruption and improve outcomes from public procurement. All right. Why do we talk about public procurement? The short answer is that there's a huge amount of money that goes into public procurement. $13 trillion is spent on public contracts every year. When we talk about public procurement, what we mean is public contracts. So anything that the government spends money on. Anytime there's a contract, it can be on pens, paper, medicines, infrastructure. There's a huge amount of money that's spent on public contracts every year. And when it's done well, it can deliver really good results. In this slide, you'll see just an example of what spending looks like. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see some of the goals that public procurement can help to deliver. So whether it's better resilience, whether it's gender equality, whether it's improved health outcomes, there's lots of different ways in which you can harness public procurement to deliver social, environmental goods. The problem is public procurement is not always spent well. We know this, right? Like public money is not always spent well. We know that 30% of public procurement money suffers from leakage, whether that's corruption, mismanagement, inefficiencies. We know that almost 60% of foreign bribery cases at the OECD involve bribes for public contracts. So public procurement is actually government's #1 corruption risk. We also know that companies in the OECD tell us, 30% of them almost tell us that bribes prevented them from winning public contracts. So this is obviously a huge piece of the puzzle. Not only is there a lot of money that's being spent in it, but there's also a lot of leakage that comes out of it. But it's not always corruption. So this is not a fake photograph, it's a real photo. It's from Lithuania. You can see immediately that there's some problems here, and this is what happens when procurement breaks down. Now, what are the problems here? There are no stalls, there are no doors, there are no sinks. Most important of all, this was meant to be a girls' changing room. So something has happened here to result in this piece of work. So that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do at open contracting. We're trying to transform public procurement so that it actually delivers the things that people need, whether it's goods, services, or public works. And how can we do this? Well, first of all, open contracting is a global norm. So we're working in over 50 countries all over the world now on various aspects of transforming public procurement. In this slide, you'll see some of the partners that we work with. You heard from Annika earlier on. They're great supporters of ours, and particularly enabling the work that we're doing here in Southeast Asia. I won't go through this slide, but you can see that some of the partners that we're working with, we're also an open government partnership or OGP norm. So we stopped counting when we got to over 200 commitments in OGP national action plans. But you can start to see how increasingly open contracting as a methodology is being adopted as a means to transform public procurement for the better. So this is our theory of change. I'm not going to go through it in detail. What you need to know is that open contracting is all about using open data to change procurement for the better. Now, with open data, we can help people to design reform goals, you can help build coalitions of change, and you can help create digital solutions that get you to an end goal. And what better looks like can be very different. You'll see in this diagram that procurement can be used to buy better for people, planet, and prosperity. Buying better for people means procuring things, goods, services, or works in a way that can deliver better social outcomes, so improved health outcomes, improved education. We can also use it to, in the fight against climate change, to help drive climate action, whether that's mitigation, adaptation. And in the context of what we're talking about today, we can use it to help fight corruption or increase opportunities for businesses and level the playing field. So I'm going to talk about one of my favorite case studies here in Southeast Asia. So it's a bit of a homecoming for me. As Cynthia mentioned, I am Malaysian. I've lived a long way from home for a long time, so it's always great to be in places like this. And this project that we're working on in Indonesia, supported by our friends UNODC, is to do with improving monitoring and oversight of public contracts. Now you see in this slide, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but we often hear from governments and civil society that they can't monitor everything everywhere all at once. And that's for various reasons that we heard earlier on this morning, lack of resources, lack of personnel, a lack of legal frameworks, all sorts of reasons why we can't be looking at everything all at once. So we can't scrutinize all public contracts, for example. So what usually happens? Usually what happens are spot checks or random samples, or sometimes you might investigate something because you know that something is not right or because something is suspicious. And this means that you're depending a lot on luck and hoping that luck will lead you to those things that you want to find out. But how lucky do you feel, and are you always going to win? So the question is, how can we develop tools and innovations so that we reduce the reliance on luck or on chance, so that you can actually have tools to identify bad behavior or wrongdoing? And this is what we're doing in Indonesia. So we're working with Indonesia Corruption Watch, ICW, and the National Procurement Service, LKPP, to transform the public procurement landscape. You'll see in this slide that we've started over the last few years or so to open up public procurement data. So we've got more than 10 years of public procurement data that's now published in the public domain, so anybody can go to the opentender.net website and see all of the information and all contracts over the last, I think now it's 13 years. More importantly, it's not enough for just data to be published. We need to make data usable. And very often people think of transparency as just releasing all information into the public domain, but most people don't have the time or the expertise to be able to analyze that data to make sense of it. So what we've done with ICW is to try and create indicators and data visualization tools so that people like you and me, who are very busy in our day jobs, whatever it is, can just go to this website and make sense of what's happening. So you can find out who's buying what and when and for how much. We've also got a bunch of indicators that can help you tell where there are corruption risks. They're called our red flags for corruption, or red flags indicators. So these are things where when you use data, you can automate analysis to try and give you clues as to when something may or may not be right? So I'll give you an example. A red flag indicator might be if all the bidders are submitting bids with identical prices. So then you know it's very unusual if you're submitting a bid for everyone to land on the same price, right? So that's a clue. That gives you an idea. That might be a red flag that you can look into it to say, well, how did all these 10 companies come up with exactly the same price for the pens that we're buying, or the water bottles that we're buying, or the roads that we're building? That's a red flag. You can also look at rotational patterns of winning, for example, where first company A wins and company B wins and company C wins, rinse and repeat. And usually what happens is that's collusive practices, right? Where companies are colluding. So I say to Cynthia, all right, you put in a good bid this time, I'll put in a bad bid, you win this time, next time it's my turn, next time it's Bagja, and so on. Those are clues. You can also sometimes get false bidders, right? Where when company A wins, company B always loses. And that's to create the impression of competition. So I purposely put in a bad bid so that my friend Cynthia can win all the time. And it looks like, and I go and ask Khairil and Kunjiji to also submit bad bids, so there's only one real bid. So those are some clues that can give you a sense of when you might need to channel your efforts towards that type of suspicious activity. It doesn't categorically mean that something is wrong, but it gives you a clue to help you figure out where you should be channeling your efforts. So those are the types of red flags that we're working on. We also have red flags now. We've developed red flags for conservation. So Bagja, we were talking about some of those challenges between development and the environment. So with WWF, we've developed, building on this red flags for integrity work that I just talked about, how you can look at red flags that can identify corruption or corrupt activity and how that affects conservation outcomes. And I can send the link to that if anyone's interested. And I'm going to talk very briefly about some of the results that we are starting to see now in Indonesia. Now, what we're doing in Indonesia, so not just are we opening up data, not just are we making it usable for people, but we're also collaborating with the government and civil society to put that data in use, keep it in use, and to try and get some outcomes from it. So what we're doing here is we're working with the government auditors for their government audits. So as I mentioned earlier, the government tells us that they can't monitor everything all at once. They usually use a random sample or some kind of sampling technique. What we're doing with them is that we're helping the government auditors to use the open data on opentender.net to target their auditing efforts so that they're only auditing those contracts that are high risk, that have many red flags or some red flags for corruption. And at the same time, we're also working with civil society to teach them how to use open data to submit public complaints so that that can then also trigger some government audits. And with that, you get not only governments auditing those contracts that are suspicious, but also civil society who are submitting complaints for anything that they find also suspicious. And then you have a bottom-up and top-down approach to create that ecosystem for monitoring and oversight. And in terms of our results, I'll close on this to say that we've got over $1.5 billion in contract value already monitored. This is up to 2022, so that's now higher. Most important of all, we're also seeing improved quality of complaints submitted, which means we are seeing that the rejection rate of those complaints have gone down because the quality of complaints have gotten better. And we're also seeing an improved response time by government to those complaints as well. And a lot of that is found from the efficiency gains from the data work that we're doing. So I'm going to pause there and hand it back to Cynthia.
Thank you. Okay, that was an extremely useful presentation to also help us understand. Indonesia has been the beacon. I say has been. So now with the new administration, it's left to be seen. But I wanted to thank all of you for providing insights into different aspects of open data. Now there's about what I'm told by the organizers is because we started early without a tea break, I'm sure you're all hungry. So we will have about another 10 or 15 minutes for questions. Does anyone have questions? Yes, I see one hand up. I'm not sure what is the system. Is there a microphone? Yeah. 2, okay. And 3 at the back. Okay, we'll stop at 3 questions first. By the way, state your name, your organization, and who you're referring the question to. Okay, the microphone is, who has the microphone? Yeah, okay, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Joy Aceron from Government Watch in the Philippines. My first question to the representative from Punch Up. Evidence on civic tech has already shown that just use of technology would increase digital divide and would exclude a huge majority of ordinary citizens and communities in citizen action for accountability. So I wonder how you're addressing the offline aspect of use of data to empower citizens. And then my second question is to open contracting partnership. It's very optimistic. I'm wondering assessment of Indonesia. I wonder if when is this initiative, because I'm looking at the Corruption Perception Index as well as the Open Budget Survey as well as the Democracy Index on Indonesia, and they are not very optimistic. So I wonder if the impact that is shown is already reflected or will be reflected in some of these indices.
Okay, thank you for that question. You got the questions? Okay, we'll take another question. Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the very comprehensive presentation and very interesting. My question is that we know that there's corruption open everywhere. We have data, open data, we have information, we have whistleblower. But the problem is, in conducting the corruption cases, investigating is time-consuming, especially procedures. And it makes the anti-corruption organization not be able to handle every case effectively. How to solve this?
Okay, thank you. And the last question?
Thank you, Cynthia. We met last year. Not question, but just statement. Thank you for the opportunity. I am Lydia, head of the Center for Legislative Drafting of the Parliamentary Expertise Agency of the House of Representatives of Indonesia. Statement especially for Mr. Bagja. Yeah. Last year, I attended the same conference and presented a method for preventing political corruption in legislation making, namely corruption risk analysis, what we call that crisis. I initiate this method because of the possibility of political corruption in the law making. And I also read a review by Tempo magazine published in 2009 regarding the tobacco clauses in the health bill. Okay, maybe you remember that, Mr. Bagja. Yeah. Currently, I and my team are working to make a crisis which is being developed at the Center for Legislative Drafting. In the future, expected to become a guideline not only for the Parliament but also to the all member of the Parliament and the government, not only Parliament but also government. I think that any method or policy need political will from the government or maybe other policy makers. Apart from that, collaboration is needed from various parties who care about preventing and eradicating corruption. And on this occasion, I wish Mr. Subagja or that Tempo magazine could also publish the crisis method that we are currently working on as one of the method in law making in law number 12 of 2011 on legislation making. Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Just enough. Mr. Subagja, I want you to respond my wish. Thank you.
Okay, that was a lot of questions. Thank you from one person. So who wants to go first?
I can start.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I think there were a couple of really great questions there. I think the first is the lady at the back on how initiatives like open contracting or beneficial ownership, some of the things that we've talked about here today, and how that can contribute to kind of broader perceptions of what's happening in a location. So things like the Corruption Perceptions Index or other. So I think the short answer for what I'm going to say is that it's very hard to show a chain of causality, right? Like to show like we did this, we opened up data here, and then like we published this, and then therefore now our ranking in the CPI has improved, for example. But you can show correlation, right? So broadly speaking, like the more that you improve things in a certain locality, the more reforms that you introduce, the more transparent you are, the more likely it is that your rankings will improve. So that's kind of the broad brush of it. But I think also very important is to think about, when you think about things like perceptions index, like who you're asking and when you're asking, because again, you might have in a government or in a country where maybe lots of really great reforms are happening, but if that hasn't been communicated well, or if citizens or the public don't know what you're doing, then that's not really going to change things much, right? So that's kind of point number 2. But having said that, there are real measures for what you can capture to check and see if progress has been made, right? And that's a lot of what we're doing at the Open Contracting Partnership. So really looking at how you measure impact. So for example, going back to complaints, we're working in Indonesia on that, like improving public complaints function and that feedback loop so that citizens can complain or like submit issues that they've identified and the government can respond, right? So it's not enough just to have a complaints mechanism that citizens can complain, but there has to be some kind of response so that citizens are feeling heard and they're feeling that those issues are being resolved. So what is that response, whether or not those complaints have been resolved, or the fix rate, and who knows about it? So I think one of the big problems that we struggle with often, and not just in Indonesia, but in many places around the world, is that you have a complaints mechanism, but that tends to be private. So the citizen complains, a response is sent to the citizen, nobody knows what the result of that complaint is, nobody knows that it has been resolved, and maybe many people are submitting the same issue, and then that then creates additional burdens for the government to respond to those same issues over and over again. Which goes to the gentleman's question in the front, right? There's a lot of work that needs to be done that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of resources to do this type of work. So the question is, how can we minimize those administrative burdens so that we get to more effective outcomes? A big part of that answer is open data. So if you have open data that's published in a standardized, structured, machine-readable format, it means that you can automate analysis, right? So it means that you don't need people to go out there and collect the data over and over again and analyze the data, usually in paper-based formats. That takes a lot of time. We're seeing that in many countries now as well. Like in India, for example, we have a recent case study where on flood procurement, for example, hundreds of disaster risk management government officials go out to collect the data every year on floods and on how procurements are done. And that takes 6 months, and then they have to analyze it, and it's not digitized. But once you digitize that, you see dramatic improvements in efficiency, because not only do you have a system that captures the data like in a meaningful way, but you can also automate the analysis, so you don't need a lot of people to process that. And then thinking about what solutions that you can make to try and like improve processes as well. So one of the big things that we're doing in Indonesia with the government auditors is actually identifying what are some of those problems, or what are some of those blockers to efficiency. And one of the big problems was that the government auditors weren't actually able to access the complaints mechanism directly. So it's a simple problem, right? So what used to happen was that citizens would submit complaints, LKPP or another government agency would vet those complaints, would assess them to see whether or not it has merits, would decide which agency then it gets forwarded to, and then it's sent to that agency, and then it gets sent finally to the auditors. The auditors then investigate, and they can't submit the answers directly to the citizens, so it goes back through that chain, and then obviously that takes a long time. So really thinking about what systems change we need to try and make things easier and faster for everyone. And similarly, going back to my example about opening up those results. So if you have a transparent process where complaints are public, so everyone knows what the complaint is, everyone knows what the result or what the answer to that complaint is, whether it's been fixed, whether it hasn't been fixed, that means that people won't be submitting the same complaints, so then government officials don't have to respond to the same thing over and over again. And again, you'll get a lot of efficiency gains there.
Yes. Anyone, Thanisara, and then anyone else wants to respond to the questions? Yeah, you first, and then Khairil.
Okay, so
yeah, okay,
I think
please go
I
ahead.
have one main question, and I can add on something that Bernadine said.
Yes.
Yeah, the first one is about the digital divide. I think in the civic tech industry or even the government tech industry, they also discuss a lot with this issue. But only from my experience, I learned a lot from the last election. Not many people, just like Cynthia asked, where do they go when they need the answer to the question? First, we develop only the tools, and then we learn from the feedback from the citizen that we didn't recognize it, that it exists, and we don't even have an internet at that time, something like that. So from the past election, we work with the kind of local media, because they can use our tools and they find a way to communicate with their community. And also with the public procurement, we work with the HAN Social Enterprise and Act. We developed the tool, the database, and then we have a kind of community networks. It's called Strong, and then they use our tool to communicate or to facilitate the people in each area. So I think it's not the database, the open data, it's just a tool. So, and now we need someone, we call it stakeholders, to use this tool to create the movement. And to add on with the question, how can we kind of handle with multiple cases of corruption, because it happens maybe every single minute. So I agree with Bernadine, the more we open, the more workforce we get. The state, the only organization doesn't have to work alone. But if you have the open data, you can have a kind of a volunteer. For example, there's a case recently happened in Bangkok. It's about the public procurement of the sport equipment. The data is open, so a lot of people start asking the question, start investigating, and kind of state it to the governor. So they need to handle this case, because we have the open data and a lot of questions come into it. So I think we can create collective intelligence if we have the open data. It's like giving power to the people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, I want to respond Ibu Lydia. On Indonesian context, that's the root of the political corruption is the financial political party. That's my opinion, and that's my magazine opinion, because the source of the all corruption in Indonesia is linked to the political party financing. For example, even on the public procurement in Indonesia, so many cases that our political parliament members that's ask to the government, what will you propose on the projects to the parliament, and after that the parliament members assign the projects, and when they discuss of the project on the parliament, that's the all parliament member make mark the project to get big money from the project. So government spends, the political members get the money to the support of the political party operation or the election. Because we have 17,000 islands in Indonesia, so this is the big and huge need big money. In the last election, some legislator candidate spent more than 50 billion rupiah, maybe 3.5 million US dollar for campaigning and to get the voters to have parliament members in national. So this is the huge. So the political actors come to the businessmen to get money to support the campaigning, and after they elect and as a parliament member, they support the legislation to back up the businessman interest. So there is the cyclist political in Indonesia. So if we want to cut the political corruption, so we should change the system to support the political operation by the, it is one choice, by the state budget. But if we do that, this is the huge money, and we should make more tax ratio, for example, tax revenue, and so on. So that is the victim of the change system is, again, the public interest. So this is the complex thing in Indonesian context, because the root of the corruption is political corruption. That's my example of the nickel. This is the outside the normal scheme. That's Mr. Windu Aji get the permit from the mining Ministry of Mining, but they don't have the permit to open area, to open forest. But why he could do that? Because he get backed up by the military police in general. So there is a local politician. So there is that's our evidence on the coverage. That's this the main the political corruption, because the Mr. Windu Aji backed by so many political players. So the result of the illegal mining in Sulawesi, they should pay so many people and his back. So there is the huge and a big problem in Indonesia. We, as an example of the procurement, we have the system, but the corruption is outside the system. What is the integrity? Political integrity, business integrity, and people integrity. So there is, we need, we call it, as Mr. President Jokowi said, that's mental revolution, mental revolution on all people in Indonesia.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
I don't want to get people upset with me for stopping you from getting the break. I'm just going to quickly touch on that. So what he said is correct. So in Malaysia, for example, I think I'm tracking about 75 billion ringgit, which is about what, 25 billion dollars of US dollars of procurement is now off budget and off book. So I cannot even apply it. So an immediate way to deal with that is to reform a specific law, and most of the people on my map just now would be out of a job if we could reform that law, which would only be possible if the politicians would be able to repeal that law. So that's on that side in terms of dealing with efficiency. But specifically on efficiency, and coming back to my last point on my talk, so I think for investigations for anti-corruption would be similar to investigative journalism. It takes a lot of resources, 3 months. So around the world right now, almost most newsrooms are facing a lot of job cuts simply because it takes too much resources for one story. And I think it would be a similar case for corruption. You'd spend a lot of months investigating, and you may not even be able to prosecute the person. So my take on this is what my last point is. So for investigative journalists, what we've done is basically closer collaboration, and there's standardization between our reporting, so that the person reporting the court case is collecting the evidence that will be needed by another person in another journalist, so that each small effort is not wasted. So that's in terms of efficiency. So I would like to propose that one of the ways to deal with investigative, in terms of prosecution and anti-corruption, is that there would be some sort of cooperation between what you're looking for in terms of your evidence needed for prosecution of your cases with journalists and maybe with civil society, so that whether what you're working on and what we're working on is the same thing that will reduce your efforts, sir. Yeah, so that would be my proposal. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good way to think about how to move forward. We're coming to the concluding part of this session already, but I wanted to leave this session with something tangible, something a little concrete, and from all the really interesting insights. It might be very useful for collaboration between journalists and civil society to actually look at how to build data around public contracts and public procurement. So we are not going to leave Bernadine or open contracting partnership alone, because I think the guidance and the standards that we're talking about and capacity building on how to actually develop the tech, the tools, and to use open data to publish with impact is where we want to go with these two networks that have been established by all of us with the help of UNODC and the Swedish government, is to do something which is of value. And I believe that everyone has said something that can add value to a coalition that needs to decide where it wants to go. And the collaboration is really essential because it's about using data effectively and thinking of how we can actually move the needle to something that even ASEAN governments will be interested to work with us. They might think, oh yeah, it's important to actually develop a framework for the ASEAN economic community, for example. I mean, that's a wishful thinking and a long way down the pipeline, but we could get there, starting with something that we can actually offer in terms of concrete data and around public procurement and contracts. So I wanted to thank the panel for all their valuable feedback. Does anybody have anything burning to say? I can always say something burning. Okay, but even if you want to say something, just keep it short so we can end the panel and go for lunch.
3 things I wanted to say. First of all, as Cynthia was saying, the Open Contracting Partnership is here to help you along the journey. We have various programs now in Southeast Asia, including here in Thailand, working with the Bangkok Governor's Office, with BMA, in the Philippines, and obviously further afield. So if you're interested in doing this, come talk to me. 1, 2, we have a lot of resources on our website, so even if you're shy, go and look at our website. And 3, everyone can start somewhere. I know that some of the examples that we talk about may seem really daunting, and it may be, you might think that maybe, in your location, you're not ready, but everyone can start somewhere. Just start with, an incremental approach, step by step, opening up the data, making those connections. We talked about human connections earlier on, what Matthew and Annika were saying, and start to build that coalition.
Yeah, from my side, the democratic system is very important thing to support the business and investment, even to protect our environment and on the climate crisis era. That's my slide. That's when after we published the illegal nickel mining in Sulawesi, and then followed by the police and prosecutor law enforcement, and then after that the legal nickel supply to the smelter is increased. That some businessmen told me that after the law enforcement, that's the legal nickel increase on the demand. That's the revenues of the companies is increased. The businessmen say that the revenues increased 4%. It is huge money because the value of the nickel business in Sulawesi is $34 billion.
Okay, thank you. And try to make it a concluding statement.
I just want to emphasize what Professor Matthew said. I think it's a good chance that we met today. I'm the one who present last year, and I take the chance to work with Khairil and some other partners. So don't lose the chance for today.
just to share that one of the concrete outputs from all the discussions here and previous is that we will be working on a guidance for those standards and also for media. And the other point I would say that was raised by now is that we've got media, we've got civil society, we've got policy. It would be great if there's a way to also include enforcement agencies, especially investigators, to be part of the collaboration, because I think there's a lot of expertise there that we could learn and share as well to improve our standards and guidelines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we give them all a round of applause? Thank you. So over back to the hosts and the organizers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, our panelists and our moderator, for sharing their contributions. Your expertise has been invaluable in exploring the role of open data in combating corruption. And ladies and gentlemen, we ended our morning session before noon. And now it's time for lunch. So our lunch will be served in chamber room on B floor. And following the lunch, we also have 3 panel discussion on other 2 topics. Foreign investor perspectives on anti-corruption in Southeast Asia and linkages between corruption and transnational crime. We will continue promptly after lunch at 1 p.m. Thank you very much and enjoy your meal. And so while your next leg in your bag, you will find the QR code on leading to the conference materials. And moreover, there will be another QR code available for you to use to evaluate this conference. And so your feedback is invaluable to helping us improve future conferences. And so kindly ask for your cooperation in evaluating today's proceeding. Thank you so much.